Alrighty, so we're resuming program. Actually, the next presentation will be about what's new in Chrome. And I'm excited to welcome again Oliver Dunk and Devlin Cronin. And Oliver is a developer relations engineer working on Chrome extensions at Google, and he's also an editor in the W3C extensions, web extensions community group. And he's joined by Devlin Cronin, who is technical lead and manager, working in the Chromium extensions platform I could do the math now, but since 2011, so a really long time already. And the two gentlemen will be talking about what's been in the works in Chrome since last time we've seen you in 2024. So please welcome them to the stage and looking forward to hearing what's been happening there.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, thanks for welcoming us back, even after we continue to make your lives difficult in new and interesting ways sometimes. So we wanted to give a little bit of a recap on what's new in Chrome. So for those that don't know me, once I figure out this clicker, there we go. No, maybe? No? Cool.
If you've blacked out the slide, maybe. Yeah.
Hey, technology. I'm Devlin. I'm the technical lead on the extensions platform, and I'm joined up here with Oliver Dunk. And like I said, we're just going to give you a little bit of an overview of what's been going on in the last year in the Chrome side and a little bit outside of it. So with that, Oliver is going to kick us off to start with what's new in the web store. Then we'll talk a little bit about the extensions platform. We'll touch on the extensions ecosystem as a broader concept and area. And then we'll touch a little bit more on what else is going on in the Chrome browser that's kind of extension adjacent and still interesting. And we'll have some time for Q&A because we know that there's always a good amount of questions here. So with that, Oliver kicks off with web store.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited. I get to kick things off with the web store. I think if you look back at sort of the last few years, a lot has happened with the web store. I think maybe 1 or 2 years ago, we had the new Chrome Web Store launch. So that was sort of a complete overhaul of the consumer experience in the web store. And then over the last few years at Ad Filtering Developer Summit, we've always been able to share some changes that we're making to either make things better for users or make things better for you as developers. And this year is no different. I actually want to start by sort of teasing something which is coming soon, and that is publisher pages. So one thing that we've heard from both users and developers is that sometimes it's hard to discover all of the items by a single publisher. We do already have the sort of related items section in the Chrome Web Store. So if you're looking at an item, you might see suggested items, and that might include items from the same publisher, but it might not contain all of the items, it might not be exhaustive, and it might also show items from other publishers. So we're actually working on a feature where you'll be able to have a publisher page, and that publisher page will show all of the items from your publisher. And then we have this concept at the top of what we're calling like a spotlight item. This is picked automatically for you, but you can also go into the developer dashboard and choose the item that you want to be most prominently featured. And so this is a really nice way to basically have a new landing page for yourself as a publisher rather than just having your item pages that you can link to. And like I said, this one's hopefully coming soon. We were hoping that maybe we'd have it live for the Ad Filtering Developer Summit. We didn't quite make that, but hopefully in the near future. Something else that we very recently launched was the new top charts feature. So if you haven't seen this, you can go to the Chrome Web Store homepage and find it. We now have a way where you can see some of the most popular extensions, some trending extensions, some new and upcoming extensions. I think that's really exciting because it's data we haven't really shared before. It's a really good way to sort of get insight into like what users are looking for on the store. So definitely go check that out if you haven't already. Moving on, just a couple of weeks ago, we launched the Chrome Web Store API v2, and I'm not sure, there's supposed to be a GIF here that will show you that it's v2. I guess that hasn't loaded, but you can imagine v2 popping in here, the new version of the API. So yeah, this is really exciting. There's lots of new features in the new API. First of all, service account support. This was something that we had a lot of people asking for, so you no longer need to sort of go through a full OAuth flow as a user, but you can create a service account and authenticate with that service account, and that's quite useful in sort of enterprise environments where you maybe have something running headless on a server that's authenticating with the API. You can now cancel submissions, so I think it was maybe last year's Ad Filtering Developer Summit, we said we were bringing the ability to cancel a submission to the developer dashboard UI, and you can now do that directly with the API as well, so sort of making sure we have feature parity there. You can update percentage rollout. This technically was something you could argue we supported in version 1 of the API, but every time you change the percentage rollout, we would submit the extension for review again. And so it's not very useful. That definitely sort of puts you off using the API, and it was a reason to go to the UI instead. So we now have a dedicated method in the API for that. And this is really nice if maybe you want to sort of automate gradually sending a new release to more and more users. There's some more capabilities around getting item status. Previously, you could only get data about your most recent draft, but you can now more clearly see this is the published version and this is the draft version. And lots of new tools and libraries. One thing that we sort of did behind the scenes was we use a lot of the sort of internal Google technology we have for building APIs. And one of the nice things that we got for free from that was lots of the sort of tooling that Google provides for APIs in general. So to give you one example of that, Google publishes client libraries for lots of its APIs. And you can now use those client libraries to call into the Chrome Web Store API. So if you go to NPM, there's now an NPM package for the Chrome Web Store API. And that makes it really easy to interact with the API in Node.js. And there are similar client libraries for other languages. I know there's a Python one, a Java one, I think a general like JavaScript for web one, and other languages as well. So that's really great, just sort of making it easier to use the API. Hopefully the API is easier in general and you have more tooling. So overall, it's a nicer picture. So to just sort of recap, we announced cancel review last year at App Filtering Developer Summit. That has now shipped and is also available in the API. We've discussed a few different things, publisher pages, top charts, V2 of the Chrome Web Store API. And there are a few other things which I don't have specific slides about, but test account credentials. So you can now provide credentials to the reviewers when you're submitting your extension. And this is useful if you have maybe some functionality behind a sign-in or a paywall to make sure that we can sort of assess the full functionality. And also verified uploads. This is something which is really important to us. We really care about the security of your Chrome Web Store developer account because as many of you in this room know, if you're publishing to millions of users, then like that's a real responsibility and you want to make sure that you're keeping that sort of power safe. And if somebody gets access to your Chrome Web Store developer account, then they could publish on your behalf and maybe reach those users. So we now support this feature where you can give the Chrome Web Store a public key, and we'll make sure that any future uploads to the Chrome Web Store with a build that was signed by the associated private key. And so this is a nice way to sort of have some more guarantees that when a new build is being submitted to the web store under your developer account, we know that it's coming from you. So that's everything I have to say about the web store. I'll be back in a moment, but for now, I think, Devlin, you're going to talk a little bit about the extensions platform.
Yeah, so I wanted to go over a couple of changes we've had on the platform side. So the part in Chrome that the extension is actually running in and the capabilities that it has. We've been doing a couple of different things throughout the last year, and so I'll be running through just a few of those different changes. One of them is around, or a set of them are around the side panel API. And so we launched the side panel API a couple of years back, and it was one of the very loved and appreciated versions of the API because then extension developers didn't have to do what they'd previously done of kind of injecting content scripts and having an iframe on the side of the page or something like that, which was bad for reliability as well as security and had some other issues. After we launched the side panel API, we saw a lot of really great adoption of it, and we also saw some good feedback about here are some ways we can make it even easier to use or give developers a little bit more freedom. So with that, we've launched a number of new changes for the side panel API, and those are get layout, which lets you see kind of where the side panel is, close, which does what it implies, and then on open and closed events for our extension to have easier management. All of these are implemented. A few of them are still making their way out through our documentation, so you'll be seeing them in the coming weeks there. We also know that declarative net request is a particularly interesting API for a lot of the folks here. One of the things that we did in collaboration with Dave Van Dyke from DuckDuckGo, so thank you, Dave, if you're watching somewhere, is implementing top domains and excluded top domains. And so what this does is it allows an extension that's using declarative net request in order to filter a request based on what the top domain of that page is. We previously allowed initiator domain, so you could see like what page is causing this request, but sometimes that's not sufficient. You want to be able to say, allow everything that's in this frame hierarchy when the top domain of the usually tab is the thing that's implementing this. So we have implemented that, and that again is making our way to our documentation soon. For storage, we also introduced access level to all storage areas. This was something that we did with the session storage namespace in Manifest v3. Just as a little bit of a recap, in Manifest v2 and earlier, the storage API was accessible from all extension contents, including content script. And that was a little bit of a security concern because that meant that a compromised renderer, if there was a web page that was malicious and somehow either got access to the content script through something like just JavaScript attacks or through something lower level of shared memory of user, things like that, they could then make IPC calls to access extension storage, which was scary. So we introduced the idea of being able to say that you can only access this from a trusted process that your extension controls, and we had that for the session API because it was deliberately intended to store slightly more sensitive information that the extension didn't want to store in an unencrypted form on disk. We allowed this now to be used with the other namespaces as well, so you can kind of tighten down your extension. So that's available there. There we go. We also launched a couple of new APIs around permissions, which are add host access request and remove host access request. We talked about these a little bit at the last AdFilter Developer Summit, and then we launched them this year. These allow your extension to be able to indicate to the user, hey, I have something important that I want to be able to do on this page. One of the things that we've been exploring for years in Chrome as well as in the other browsers is how do we give users more control and visibility and agency over when and where their extensions run? Because a lot of extensions need to fundamentally have access to a large swath of pages because they might have something to do on all of those, but users might not be comfortable with those extensions running on a certain set. So, for instance, some users might not want their extensions running on their banking site because many banking sites don't have as many ads. Some of them do, and they shouldn't. But this kind of allows users to see when an extension says, you haven't let me run here, but I have something important that I can do. I have something that I can tweak about the page. And so it's a little bit more visible than just having that passive icon that's the tool and tool belt. So this is something that's being incorporated into the new UIs that we're building out in Chrome that kind of bring those capabilities for the user more front and center. We also had a couple of just smaller tweaks that are kind of the junk drawer side of just these small things that give extensions a little more capability in different ways. One of them was around getting the partition key for the cookies API. We also added new capabilities, the desktop capture API that mirrors some of the open web capabilities there. We added a frozen property on tab so you could see whether or not the tab was frozen at that time. This is just a set of some of the smaller tweaks that we make throughout the year to make sure that we're keeping up the extension API with the different changes that come through Chrome. We also tweaked how a couple of different APIs worked. One of the biggest ones, I think, was around the user scripts API. So the user scripts API was launched in Manifest version 3 as a way to allow extension developers to provide user scripts, which fundamentally need to be kind of this remotely hosted code. But in Manifest v3, we don't encourage remotely hosted code because it's a massive security concern. So we wanted to find a way of kind of balancing that. And one of the things that we did was we knew that we had to have a different permission that users could use in order to have that access to the capability to have remotely hosted code. Originally, for want of a better UI surface, we tied that to the developer mode toggle in the Chrome extensions page because user scripts were more of a developer mode feature, and we kind of said that, well, if you're not, at least to some extent, a developer, it's really hard to even explain what user scripts are, why you should maybe use them, and why you should maybe be afraid of them. You know, if you tell users, well, you're running untrusted JavaScript code that could be updated independently of your Chrome browser and extensions, so you should probably only do that and add it from these trusted sources if you really know what you're doing. It's a hard strain to fit in that UI, so instead we just said, developers get it. But we heard from a lot of extension developers as well as some users that was still a little bit... It wasn't quite the right tie to make to force them to be in developer mode. And also it had a little bit of other considerations around like the developer mode is a global toggle, so it wasn't per extension. You couldn't say I want this extension to have this permission, but not these other ones. So one of the things that we changed here in response to a lot of the feedback that we got from developers was in adding a new toggle to the Chrome extensions page on a per extension basis, very similar to file access and incognito access that allows users to choose which extensions had this permission. And we do our best to describe what the user scripts are doing, but mostly still say, please make sure you know what you're doing for this. Some of the other things that are coming soon, we are working on adding support for the browser namespace. So in other browsers that implemented their API surface model after Chrome, a lot of the APIs are exposed on window.browsers, like window.browser.tabs, whereas in Chrome, they're exposed on chrome.browser. The implementation is all there. We hit one small snag because of Rob. Because there's a polyfill that provides support for promise returns from runtime.on messages. And we realized that one of the things that the polyfill was doing there was actually just looking for the presence of browser. So we are implementing both that as well as the promise support for a runtime on message, and then that will be rolling out very soon in the next, probably within the next month or so. There are also some experimental things that we're looking at, both in Chrome as well as outside. One of those experimental changes is around split tabs. I don't know if folks have tried this out. It's fun. Split tabs allow you to have kind of the side-by-side view for different tabs. I didn't realize how much I wanted this until it came out, and then I realized that this is amazing. But with all of these things, especially around things like tab management in different frames and where extensions might need to inject or be able to monitor what's going on in those different frames and contexts, we knew that we wanted extensions to be able to look at this and at the very least be able to handle the case of having split tabs and how they might need to react to that, because now there might be multiple frames in the same tab. And figuring out how do we represent that in the existing APIs, minimizing the breakage to extensions, and then hopefully in the future also allowing extensions themselves to use this API similar to what we do with tab groups and similar. So this is one of the experimental areas that we're looking at. It's 2025. We still say AI a lot. We'll say it more throughout this presentation. Don't worry. I'm sure we'll hear more about it today. The prompt API is one that we had experimented with for quite a while, and this is exactly kind of what it sounds like. It allows different JavaScript contexts to access a prompt and give it some information and tweak some settings around it and then get a response back. As we mentioned last year at the AdFilter Developer Summit here, that was available behind an origin trial. It's now available to all extensions everywhere. They can just use it. It just works, as well as kind of being rolled out behind an origin trial to websites. This is one of the most seen and visible APIs that we have for AI, but it's not the only one we're looking at. And we have a few more. And so here you kind of see the graph of what's available to extensions, what's available everywhere, and then what's available as an origin trial. So we have 7 of these different APIs that are kind of split up between different generic APIs as well as different very targeted use case-centric APIs that are available in those different contexts. And then with that, I'm going to hand it back to Oliver for some more information on what we've been doing in the extensions ecosystem.
Perfect. Yeah, another area that I really love, so excited to talk about this. First of all, the Web Extensions Community Group. So just as a recap, this is a W3C community group. Chrome participates. We also have participation from Mozilla and from Apple and from Edge. So we sort of have all of the browsers represented. And we get together and we talk about how we want to move the platform forward. So this is really about getting feedback from developers and identifying gaps in the platform, maybe identifying ways in which we could make the APIs easier to use or easier to use correctly. And it's a really nice initiative. I'm really glad we have the group. I've shown this slide for the last few years, so I always like to come back to it just sort of as a recap. So this was the 2024 slide. If we move forward, this is the 2025 slide. We have some more participants, which is great. We have some more issues. Thankfully, same caveat as last year, that not all of these are open issues. We have also resolved some issues. And the number of meetings is very similar. We've continued to meet sort of on a bi-weekly cadence. So we meet every 2 weeks for a virtual call, and then we meet twice a year for an in-person meeting. So we met in March. That was in Berlin at Mozilla's office. And then we'll also be meeting at TPAC in November. So that's sort of W3C's annual conference. And actually, I think it's a slightly smaller number of meetings. Since the last Ad Filtering Developer Summit, me and Devlin were trying to figure out what was going on there. I think it's just the time between the 2023 and 2024 Ad Filtering Developer Summit was longer than the time between the previous and this Ad Filtering Developer Summit. But other than that, we've continued to meet on the same cadence, so there's nothing more to say about that. One of the things that we're looking to do is create a W3C working group. And so if you're familiar with the W3C, you might have heard of the concept of community groups and working groups. Right now, we're a community group, which is definitely still a group in the W3C, but it has a little bit less formal recognition, especially around, we don't have any specific deliverables that we're sort of required to produce. We're just sort of meeting as a community and working on the things that we think are most interesting to us. By becoming a working group, that actually changes slightly. One of the things is we sort of have a formal commitment to writing a specification and making that into a standard. And so we already have in our GitHub repository for the community group a sort of draft specification, but I think it's fair to say it's very sort of rough and ready and very sort of early days with that. One of the things that we're excited about is that if we were to become a working group, we would hopefully put more time towards actually trying to build out that specification and specify all of the many extension APIs that we have. The other thing is having a greater presence in the W3C. And like I mentioned, community groups are definitely still real groups within the W3C. But I think we hope that as we continue to have conversations and try to work more with other working groups, becoming a working group will sort of give us a little bit more recognition where we can say that we have a working group and the W3C has sort of recognized that extensions are an important area that deserves a working group, and that might make it easier for us to do some of the sort of cross-group collaboration that we see being really helpful in the future. Now I want to talk a little bit about one of the changes that we made over the last year, and I think there's sort of some nice ways in which this interacted with the community. So Chrome for a long time has supported a load extension flag. And so this is a command line flag that you can use, or at least could use with any Chrome build. So you could launch Chrome stable with this load extension flag and use it to load an extension when Chrome starts. And this is really useful. There are some valid use cases, but unfortunately, you just can't have nice things. People also use that to load unwanted extensions into the browser. And so we knew we had a problem. We couldn't keep allowing that because, of course, we care about users and we want to do the best for them that we can. So we started looking at actually removing the load extension flag. We posted in the Chromium extensions mailing list that we have to get feedback and make sure we sort of understood the impact of that. And what we ended up doing is removing that flag from what we call branded Chrome builds. So it's no longer available in, say, Chrome stable or Chrome beta, but it is still available in Chromium and also a special build that we have called Chrome for Testing, which is for testing use cases. And that is sort of already that sort of addresses some of the use cases, but tests really need this capability, and they need that even in, for example, Chrome stable, because maybe you want to see how your extension behaves in Chrome stable, and so you really want to run your tests with Chrome stable. And we try and make Chrome for Testing the best build for testing, but sometimes you do just really want to use that same build that the users are using. And so we tried to look at how can we sort of address both sides of this. How can we continue with this flag removal, but also still make sure that we're addressing this really important use case? And so what we, along with the community, started to do is to contribute better ways of loading extensions to some popular testing frameworks. So I actually contributed some code to Puppeteer. And so starting in Puppeteer 24.8, you can actually load extensions using a more sort of ergonomic, developer-friendly API. And behind the scenes, this is no longer relying on the flag. So this is actually using some methods that are available in the Chrome DevTools protocol and in turn WebDriver BiDi. And so this is something which will continue to be supported for the longer term, and is hopefully a nicer API to use as well. And then this support is also rolling out in Selenium. So we had a community contributor who opened a pull request for the Python bindings in Selenium 4.34.0. And I believe there's also bindings for other languages like Java that have been in various Selenium releases since. So I think this is actually a really nice story where we started with actually needing to remove something, but we ended up hopefully giving you a little bit more and giving you easier ways to load extensions within the browser. Something else that all of the browsers have been working together on in the Web Extensions community group is adding support for extensions to web platform tests. So web platform tests is this sort of cross-browser effort to have a shared test suite that we can use to make sure that APIs are interoperable and implemented with the behavior that we'd expect. And we're working on adding support for extensions to this. So at the moment, it's still very early days. You can see this pull request is just sort of adding the ability to load extensions at all. And there were some RFCs that I know Apple was heavily involved in, and also Mozilla and Chrome. And hopefully that then gives us the building blocks to start actually running these tests, running some real tests that are actually testing functionality. So hopefully that's something that sort of over the next couple of years we'll start to see. And I know often when I talk to extension developers, this is something that they find quite exciting, because dealing with APIs that don't behave quite the same across browsers is always frustrating. And hopefully this is another step towards making that less of a problem that you have to deal with. And now back to Devlin to talk a little bit about what's been happening sort of more widely in the Chrome browser outside of just extensions.
Yeah, so the Chrome browser is always evolving in different ways, bringing new functionality, new tooling, new UI surfaces to users. And so there's a few things here that I thought might be interesting for this community, even though extensions don't directly incorporate with them yet. One of the biggest ones is that Google has a small product called Gemini that you might have heard of. Thank goodness we renamed it. Anyway, we incorporated this into the Chrome browser, and this was one of the things we talked about at eyeo and has been very rapidly iterated on, that we're investing a lot of time and energy into. And this is really just kind of the incorporation of the idea of something like Gemini, this intelligent-ish thing that you can talk to and that can help you out with different tasks in the browser. It's something that we're exploring. What are the best ways for this? What are the best utilities? What are the best use cases this can solve? And what might it be able to do and what might it not be able to do? And how do we have it adapt to the user's needs in different ways? So this is obviously one of the things that we'll be continuing to look at and expand the capabilities of in the coming months. One of the other things that we've been looking at is around sign-in and sync in Chrome. I think this is something that we chatted a little bit about last year as well, but we realized that just most users didn't understand the difference between sign-in and sync, and so we've been continuing to try to make that simpler for people, as well as do it in a way that doesn't break the expectations of things like extensions that are then being synced between devices and handling different things. This is something that we roll out on different platforms that didn't have extensions like iOS, and we're gradually rolling out on desktop as well through different phases. And then one of the things that we've been working on as well is just a lot of architectural work. This is in the browser as a whole. This is also in the extension system. But Chromium is a very mature software project at this point. I don't think there's anyone yet on the team that is younger than Chromium, but it's getting depressingly close sometimes. And certainly there are libraries there that are older. And so with that, there's a lot that we need to do to make sure that we are maintaining the product, to make sure that it's kept in a technically healthy state. That's important for just having the quality that we expect to deliver to our users, but it's also important because it allows us to do things faster. And so one of the things that we sometimes need to take a step back and do is figure out, okay, what do we do to re-architect some of the internals here so that we can iterate faster in the future, we can make changes faster and adapt to new things, whether that be new APIs or new features or new platforms that we need to support. And so that's been one of the other big steps that we've been working towards over the last year in the Chrome browser as well as in the extension space. And with that, I just want to say thank you. So I always kind of say thanks, and it's a little bit too early in the day and the conference to go too far into it, but this really is one of my favorite events of the year to look forward to. We've been coming to this since 2018, and I'm so very glad that it's still going on. We've been across 4 different countries now, so I'm curious to see where 2026's will be. But I know that also over the course of the last several years, I feel like both inside the tech sector and outside the tech sector, every year has felt like there's a decade worth of developments in that time. I think things didn't really ever slow down. And I've just been really excited to see how we've been able to adapt to that. So between everyone in this room, between the companies represented here that are app developers or extension developers or browser vendors or filterless maintainers, we really actually have the opportunity to impact billions of users' lives in a material way. That's something that I still can't quite believe and is sometimes very scary, but it really is true. And it's always very encouraging to me to see just how we've been able to come together and make sure that we are all together working towards making user lives better and making our corner of the space better. And so thank you all for always working towards that and always kind of working with us to make sure that we're doing that, moving in the same direction. So thank you all, and thank you for welcoming us to Cyprus. And with that, like I promised, we have some time for Q&A. I would never have expected Andre to have a question.
Hi, Devlin. Hi. Thank you so much for the talk. My question is, you haven't talked about that, but anyways, last year you brought the local Gemini model into Chrome. How has it been? Is it can we expect it to stay there, and can we expect it to be improved further, or is it just like a one-time experiment?
So I'll caveat this by saying I don't directly work on that, so take this with a grain of salt. So I'm not committing to anything. But yeah, we shipped Gemini Nano, which is the on-device model that's small enough to fit on many devices. It's not on every device, and it is shipped out separately from the Chrome browser because we didn't want users to have to download that model as part of installing Chrome. But that is what is powering the prompt API. And so I believe that is going to stay on the device. I am not aware of any plans we have to remove it, and we are always working to improve our models to make them more powerful. And so that's something that you can certainly track just outside of Chrome as well for Google, is seeing the developments of Gemini over the course of years. And so I expect that or something similar to stay in the browser in some form or other for the foreseeable future.
Thanks.
I'd also just add that the API surface definitely improved between the origin trial and the final APIs. So
Yes.
there's definitely like changes that are happening. And
so thank you to anyone who happens to be here that was part of the origin trial and I was able to provide that feedback. So, right.
G'day. Okay, so obviously we haven't talked about the status of, I guess, EB3 and how we kind of move so far. I mean, obviously everything is already being rolled out so far, but there's still some teething issues, or at least some issues still outstanding in the GitHub, or say some features from EB2 that haven't been considered to be fixed in EB3. Just an example, for example, regex is very iffy on EB3, and there's a lot of unsupported functions on EB3 regarding regex, for example.
Is specifically regex in the form of like matching rules conditions
declared
in that request?
Some supported regex filtering isn't supported in the same way, say, on the EB2. And it can be quite important for authors to know that, say, for example, that they want the greatest support. I guess they want the same level of support in EB2 on EB3, and I guess is there a limitation? Is there a reason why we can't, say, improve at least regex on EB3?
So for all of these, it's going to be very case dependent. With regexes in particular, we wanted to make sure that we had a kind of guaranteed performance level, and the best proxy that we had for that was around the size of the regex that gets computed. Unfortunately, the size of the regex does depend on the implementation of RE2, the library that we use underneath. But that's where that limitation comes from, is making sure that it fits under that limit. And there are some things that we've explored whether we can make that better. One is finding out whether all of the different cases need to be solved by regexes. One of the ones that's come up in the past that we're looking into, we can find the bandwidth through addresses around decoding URIs, where a lot of different link redirectors like t.co and stuff like that, you need to decode the underlying URI in order to do something. And so that right now is sometimes solved with regex, and we'd like to be able to move them off that and just provide a different Boolean flag. For other ones, we're looking at just what are the main things that they're addressing. Is this something where we do just need to raise that limit of what the regex capability is, or is there a different thing that we can do? Or sometimes the answer has been, can we make RE2 better? And so can we reduce the impact in that way? It's always kind of just this balancing act to make sure that we allow extensions to have the capabilities that they need, but also make sure that users have kind of a guaranteed good experience. So I guess the short version is we are always looking at ways we can make it better, so I wouldn't consider anything off the table or that we have discounted those things. So we do know that they continue to be pain points, and we're looking at ways we can address them.
And I guess lastly was the obviously the limits. I unfortunately made a commit that was probably too large for a lot of extension authors. It just was you. It was me. I did not think. Well, when you make a change, you don't consider your change would affect extensions that dramatically. The reference was 6,800 lines or 6,800 domains, which if you have a limit of 5,000, you basically hit the limits straight away. And it means that extension can't update the list anymore. I guess my question would be, for better flexibility, I know the threat is they're wanting like 3,000, 5,000 domains or something, and I believe that's obviously an overkill. But if we could just bump it to even just like 10,000, or at least to have a little bit more flexibility, because I guess that at the moment the main issue is like every time I make a large commit, I have to check all these extensions to see how much they've used or how many tokens they've used before I make the change. And I just don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to keep, so this extension has used 2,000 tokens, and this extension's used 3,000 tokens, and I don't want to break either extension if I make a sizable change. So if we have a slightly larger limit, it means at least I can make the change without something breaking, for example. And I guess if we up the limit to something a little bit extension, say 10,000, for example, it means that there's a less of a chance of that breaking if something's slightly larger. I guess make it a little more flexible is what I'm saying. The tokens, and it would be nice if something was made there for us.
So there's a couple of different pieces there. First off, which limit were you hitting with that?
I think it was the dynamic limit that I was hitting. I think it was 5,000.
So it sounded maybe like you were talking about there's the limit on the number of disabled static rules, which is used if you have like a removal and then you need to disable the old rules or disable the rules that were removed.
Because the dynamic is 30K, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
I'd have to check the documentation.
The dynamic, and I think what was the limit for the 5,000?
The 5,000 is disabling static rules, which is something that a lot of extensions need to do when you push that update, is disable old versions of those rules so that they don't get hit. So in speaking a little bit to that, just in general, of can we increase limits, that's always something that we are open to. And I think actually Oliver and I were just talking about this one yesterday, as this one seems to be one that is causing developers pain, and we always want to not do that. We want to balance that out. And so it seems like we found a fairly good, I'm sure that people will sometimes disagree with this, but fairly good medium for many of the limits. And this one does seem to be one that we might need to find ways to increase or address. One of the things that always helps us there is when we see just analysis from people in the community around, here's what the 90th percentile or 99th percentile is, here's how we might deal with this, or here's how often this could come up. That's something that's really, really valuable to us in making those decisions. Specifically with this limit, because of how it happens to be implemented in the Chromium browser, there's some considerations around the size there that if we increase it significantly past its current form, we need to potentially change the implementation, which can change some of the guarantees that we have around when it can be executed. So there are some trade-offs there that we would probably want to discuss more in the WCG around what is a good balance here, and would you sacrifice some timing guarantees in order to get a larger limit in that area? But that's something we need to discuss more. But like I say, this actually is one that Oliver and I were talking about. If we might need to be thinking about this.
Sounds good. It was just something that I was trying.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up. Like I said, the most valuable thing is that feedback and any data that we can get around it.
Yeah.
So.
If we can make updates, authors not think about, do I have to check various limits of extensions? Just one less thing to worry about, and guess because we're in a separate bubble. We don't think about the extensions, and we don't think about extensions. List authors do their list author things. Extensions do their extension things.
I think that's sort of the approach we've tried to take in general. Like, I know AdGuard have been very good about providing data in the community group to say, like, this is the number of rule sets that most users have enabled, and then based on that, this is the number of rules that are changing. And like with some of the other limit increases we did in the past, we were really trying to find numbers that will work for a significant number of users. And I think, like you were saying, this is the one limit where it's clear that actually maybe the limit isn't quite working for that. So I completely get it. I think you shouldn't have to think about the changes you make to the filter list. You should make the changes that make sense, and then everything else should work from there. So, yeah.
Peter has a question, then Sam. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for the update. Quick question. When's Manifest V4 coming out?
So this is actually something we've talked about. There is no timeline for it yet. Right now, we're just at the phase of like, hey, things are happening. Manifest v3 is essentially the current platform. We don't need a new Manifest version or to make changes or additions to the platform. We really only do those Manifest changes when we want to bundle a lot of things together and have a clean division, so we can tell like what's supported and not. There are some of those things that we've talked about in the past of, would this make sense to do? And maybe this is the type of thing that would be something you would introduce in a manifest version. Just off the top of my head, one of those is around like, what if extension events were more like web events, where right now they're very disparate for historical reasons, but what if they're implemented more in the same way and they supported different things? That's a huge breaking change, and that would probably be something that we might actually tie to a manifest version. We've not started doing any of that, so there's no timeline at all at the moment for MV4.
Internal working group. Or anything like that?
There's only been internal brainstorming around like, would we do this?
Yeah, nothing that I've seen. At least my experience is I go to Devlin and I say, it would be really great if we could make this change, and he says, manifest v4. Not that it's happening, just that. Yeah, like I have a Google Doc where I'm like, these things would all be really nice. Like we should rename the tabs permission. That's just a confusing name. Yeah, there are a bunch of changes that we should make.
But again, that's only for things that are those bigger breaking changes where we need that defined cut. And then I think one of the other things that we would do much more with manifest version 4 is we now have the WCG as well as better working relationships with a lot of the browsers as a result of some of the shared APIs. So we'd be able to develop it much more in that way. And so it'd be something where we'd hope to have a lot of that process be fairly transparent and be happening in the open. So,
Cool. Thank you.
Sam, and then I think we're just about at time. So.
Yep. Hello. Thanks for the talk. I wonder, like, if you're going to introduce some kind of like versioning scheme in the DNR API, because it's really promising to see you're adding like many constraints to the API. It's really nice, but sometimes like there may be a backward incompatible change to the DNR. I mean the JSON file, and the user may have an outdated extension. It just crashes, especially for the dynamic roles. What do you think about it?
We try to make it pretty rare to have backwards incompatible changes where it would crash or result in things breaking. I can think of a couple of times that we've changed things like the case sensitivity by default, but those should be, like, say, very, very exceptional. If we started doing those things more regularly, we probably would introduce some sort of field for this is the version of DNR that I'm using, and we do have that as an implementation to re-index the flat buffer files when that happens. But for now, I think we're more concentrated on we should just not make breaking changes whenever possible.
And for the limits, I think almost all of the limits have only ever gone up, right? I think it's very rare if ever we've said we're going to suddenly introduce this limit and restrict this. Yeah, so it should always be that we support more rather than less.
Thank you. Make up the answer. It makes sense for now.
Sneak in one from Sam.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. So now that MV2 phase out is effectively complete, I wonder, so from your perspective, how you feel about the MV3 transition. Was it successful? Did you meet the goals you set up at start? Like I think at the start, or performance goals and things like that. Do you have metrics that show now extensions are faster, or there's less performance issues from extensions, or other benefits you see?
Yeah, great question. And probably more than we can fit into a short time, but some bullet points. I think overall, yes, we did meet a lot of the goals that we had. So the goals for Manifest v3 were around changing some of the API surfaces to be more performant, more privacy preserving, more secure. We removed the ability to have remotely hosted code with some certain carve-outs for things like user scripts. We have seen a lot of success in those different ways. So metrics are a little bit challenging because it's very difficult to compare an extension to extension basis. We can't just say, like, look, all the MV3 extensions are doing this and all the MV2 extensions are doing that, because there are different sets of extensions. Even within the same extension, maybe people just got better or worse at developing the extension. So we can't really say that this particular extension, but what we can do is look at different targeted APIs. And this is something that we did with DNR and web request, was find out when the user has web request extensions that are intercepting network traffic or changing it versus DNR extensions, what is the delta? How long are they waiting? And we did see that DNR was between like 1 and 600 times faster than web request. So that is a very material change that we had as a part of that change to allow that decision to happen synchronously in the browser process. So we have other metrics as well for different things around this is the type of memory consumption, or this is the type of performance we've seen on this API. And so I think in a lot of ways, it was very successful in that. I think in other ways, it was very bumpy, and I think everyone would agree with me on that. But I think even with that, with a lot of the friction that came there, I think actually a lot of good came out of it. I think that it was more or less a direct result of Manifest v3 that a lot of our different fora and communications started happening, where before that, the Chromium extensions at chromium.org group was basically a ghost town and no one ever posted there. And now it's kind of become one of the de facto areas that people communicate, as well as then in the WCG, where we were saying, okay, we want to align with other browser vendors on some of this platform going forward. And so I think that even though there was a lot of pain in that growth, I think that it got us into a much better state now. So I think we both met the more technical aspect and the stated goals, as well as had some ecosystem advantages throughout it. But like I say, I also don't want to downplay the pain and agony that we've cost everyone with that transition. It was always known that it would be a lot of work for developers that we wanted to do in order to make the user product and user experience better. So as always, thank you all for bearing with us as we did that. Okay, with that, I think we are actually a little over time. So we are going to vanish very quickly off stage.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.